War did not end with black and white footage, muddy trenches, or propeller-driven aircraft. It simply changed its face. In the modern age, battles are no longer fought only by soldiers charging across open fields. They unfold in burning cities, frozen mountains, desert highways, and glowing radar screens. Precision, guided missiles replace massed artillery. Drones hover silently where bombers once roared. Decisions made in seconds can change the fate of nations. These are not ancient legends or distant myths. These battles happened in our lifetime. Moments when technology met human courage. When outnumbered forces stood their ground. When a single night, a single decision, or a single unit reshaped modern warfare forever. This is not just a list of conflicts. This is the story of 7 incredible modern battles that proved one timeless truth: war may evolve, but chaos, fear, and heroism remain the same. The Battle of 73 Easting, the tank battle that ended before it began. The desert of southern Iraq looked endless, a flat, lifeless ocean of sand stretching beyond the horizon. Visibility was poor. A sandstorm churned the sky into a yellow haze, blinding optics and confusing navigation systems. To most soldiers, this would have been a nightmare. For the U.S. Army's 2nd Armored Cavalry Regiment, it was the perfect battlefield. It was February 26, 1991, during the final phase of Operation Desert Storm. Coalition forces had already smashed Iraqi command centers from the air. But now came the dangerous part: ground contact with the Iraqi Republican Guard, Saddam Hussein's most feared and best equipped force. Among them stood the Tawakalna Division, packed with Soviet-built T-72 tanks, armored vehicles, and entrenched infantry. On paper, this was a formidable enemy. Iraqi officers believed that if the Americans advanced into their defensive lines, the desert would become a killing field. They were wrong. A collision in the sand, Captain H.R. McMaster's Eagle Troop was moving forward when their scouts suddenly reported enemy contacts. Shapes emerged through the dust: tanks, infantry, fighting vehicles, anti-tank positions. This was not supposed to happen yet. The Americans had stumbled directly into the heart of an Iraqi armored defense. There was no time to stop, no time to reorganize. McMaster made a decision that would become legendary. He ordered an immediate attack. US 11A1 Abrams tanks surged forward, firing on the move. Thermal sights cut through the sandstorm like ghostly eyes, exposing Iraqi vehicles that could not see back. One by one, Iraqi tanks erupted into flames, hit before their crews even knew they were under attack. The range was brutal, often under 500 meters, sometimes point blank. The Iraqis fired blindly. Their rounds missed, detonating harmlessly in the sand. Meanwhile, American gunners picked targets with surgical precision. Within minutes, the battlefield turned into a graveyard of burning armor. Technology meets training. This was not just a victory of machines, it was a victory of doctrine. The Iraqi army relied on static defenses and outdated command structures. Orders moved slowly. Communication broke down under pressure. The U.S. Army, on the other hand, operated as a single, integrated organism. Tanks, scouts, artillery, and air support flowed together. Even in chaos, they adapted. When Iraqi units attempted to counterattack, they ran directly into prepared American kill zones. When they tried to retreat, U.S. forces pursued relentlessly. By the end of the engagement, over 160 Iraqi tanks destroyed, hundreds of armored vehicles eliminated, entire defensive lines collapsed, American losses: 0 tanks destroyed in direct combat. The battle was effectively over before Iraqi commanders even understood what was happening. Why 73 Easting changed modern warfare. The Battle of 73 Easting proved something the world had never seen so clearly before. Modern war is decided by information, speed, and precision. It showed that a smaller, better, trained force with superior technology could annihilate a numerically strong enemy in open battle. It became a textbook example taught in military academies worldwide. And most importantly, it sent a chilling message. The age of massed armor without air cover, electronic warfare, and real-time intelligence was over. The future had arrived, fast, lethal, and unforgiving. When a peacekeeping mission turned into urban warfare hell, Mogadishu was never meant to become a battlefield. In 1993, Somalia was already broken. A nation collapsed under famine, warlords, and lawlessness. The United Nations arrived with a simple goal: deliver food and stabilize the chaos. For American forces, this was not a war. It was a humanitarian mission. At least, that was the plan. But in the narrow streets of Mogadishu, where concrete buildings pressed tightly together, and alleys twisted like traps, modern warfare was about to collide with ancient tribal conflict. and the result would shock the world. The mission that went wrong. On October 3, 1993, U.S. Army Rangers and Delta Force launched Operation Gothic Serpent. Their objective was precise capture. Lieutenants of Somali warlord Mohamed Farah aided, whose militia had been attacking UN peacekeepers. The plan was bold but simple. Helicopters would insert elite troops into the heart of the city. The target building would be secured in minutes. Prisoners would be loaded onto vehicles. The entire force would be gone within an hour. No tanks. No heavy armor. Just speed and surprise. For the first few minutes, everything worked. Then the city fought back. Black Hawks falling from the sky. As helicopters hovered above Mogadishu, Somali militiamen, armed with little more than rifles and rocket-propelled grenades, filled the streets below. They had watched these operations before. They had learned. At 30:43 p.m., a rocket struck Super 61, an MH-60 Black Hawk. The helicopter spiraled out of control and slammed into the city. Suddenly, the mission changed. Rangers and Delta operators rushed to secure the crash site. Minutes later, a second helicopter, Super 64, was hit and went down miles away. Now the Americans were trapped. 2 crash sites, hundreds of wounded, thousands of hostile fighters closing in. The city turned into a maze of death. Urban combat at point-blank range. Fighting in Mogadishu was nothing like the deserts of Iraq. This was close, brutal, and personal. Somali fighters fired from rooftops, windows, and alleyways. Every corner hid an ambush. Communication broke down as vehicles became lost in unfamiliar streets. Inside one of the crash sites, 2 Delta Force snipers, Gary Gordon and Randy Shugart, volunteered to be inserted despite knowing the odds. They defended the downed pilot with sniper rifles until they ran out of ammunition. They were both killed in action. Their sacrifice would later earn them the Medal of Honor. Night fell, and the city became even more dangerous. Without night vision equipment, Somali fighters relied on sheer numbers and fearlessness. American troops, surrounded and low on ammunition, fought room to room, street to street, blood mixed with dust and debris. This was no longer a rescue mission. It was survival, the long night and the mile of death. Relief finally arrived in the form of Pakistani tanks and Malaysian armored vehicles. But reaching the trapped Americans required a desperate convoy push through hostile streets. When the survivors finally broke out at dawn, they did not ride. They ran. What followed became known as the Mogadishu Mile. Exhausted soldiers sprinting through gunfire, wounded carried on shoulders, chased by enemies only meters away. By the time it was over, 18 American soldiers killed, 73 wounded, hundreds, possibly thousands of Somali fighters dead. The images of a dead American soldier being dragged through the streets would haunt the world. Why Mogadishu changed everything. The Battle of Mogadishu lasted less than 24 hours, but its impact lasted decades. It reshaped U.S. foreign policy. It ended American involvement in Somalia. It made the world rethink peacekeeping missions in hostile cities. Most importantly, it proved that modern armies are vulnerable in urban warfare. No matter how advanced their technology, sometimes the most dangerous battlefield is not open ground, but a city that refuses to be controlled. How a modern army was destroyed by a city. At the end of 1994, Russian commanders believed the war would be over in days. Grozny, the capital of Chechnya, was supposed to fall quickly, a symbolic strike that would crush the separatist rebellion and reassert Moscow's control. Russian generals spoke confidently of armored columns, rolling through the city unopposed, greeted not by resistance, but by surrender. What awaited them instead was one of the most devastating urban defeats suffered by a modern army since World War II. A New Year's Eve disaster. On December 31, 1994, Russian armored columns advanced into Grozny from multiple directions. Tanks and infantry fighting vehicles moved down wide avenues in tight formations, just as they had been trained. It was a fatal mistake. Chechen fighters had studied Russian doctrine carefully. They avoided open confrontation. Instead, they turned Grozny into a layered killing zone. Fighters occupied basements, upper floors, rooftops, attacking tanks from above and below. As the Russian columns entered the city center, the trap was sprung. Rocket-propelled grenades slammed into the thin top armor of tanks. Anti-tank teams fired from point-blank range, disappearing into stairwells and tunnels before return fire could find them. Vehicles burned, blocking streets and trapping those behind them. Within hours, entire Russian units ceased to exist. The city that devoured armor. Russian commanders struggled to understand what was happening. Radios failed. Maps were outdated. Units became isolated in the concrete maze. Infantry support, critical in urban combat, was often missing, leaving tanks blind and vulnerable. Chechen fighters moved like ghosts. Small teams communicated by runners and radios, coordinating ambushes with deadly efficiency. They used civilian buildings as fortresses, and the city's underground infrastructure, to appear where least expected. Russian artillery responded with overwhelming force. Entire neighborhoods were flattened in an attempt to crush resistance. But destruction did not bring control. It brought more chaos. From shock to brutality, as losses mounted, Russian tactics changed. Precision gave way to saturation. Artillery and airstrikes pounded Grozny relentlessly. The city was reduced to ruins, earning the grim title of the most destroyed city on Earth by the mid-1990s. Eventually, sheer firepower broke organized Chechen resistance inside the city. But the victory came at a horrifying cost. Thousands of Russian soldiers were killed or wounded. Chechen fighters melted away, surviving to fight another day. What was meant to be a swift demonstration of strength became a lesson written in blood. Why Grozny redefined urban warfare. The First Battle of Grozny proved a brutal truth. Modern tanks and armored vehicles are nearly helpless without infantry, intelligence, and coordination in dense cities. It forced militaries worldwide to rethink urban doctrine. Training shifted. Combined arms became non-negotiable. Cities were no longer just terrain, they were living weapons. Grozny did not just break a city. It shattered illusions. The most violent urban battle of the Iraq War. Fallujah was not just a city. By late 2004, it had become a symbol, a fortress of resistance, a message to coalition forces that Iraq was far from pacified. Insurgent groups turned its mosques homes and alleyways into a defensive network designed for one purpose: bleed any army that dared enter. The United States knew this would not be a quick fight. It would be decisive or disastrous. The city before the storm, Fallujah sat just west of Baghdad, dense and defiant. After an earlier failed attempt to control the city, insurgents had months to prepare. They planted thousands of improvised explosive devices. They reinforced buildings. They mapped kill zones. Foreign fighters mixed with local militants. Snipers trained their rifles on streets that would soon run red. When Operation Phantom Fury began in November 2004, it was the largest American military offensive since Vietnam. This time, there would be no withdrawal. A methodical invasion, unlike Mogadishu or Grozny, Fallujah was approached with ruthless planning. U.S. Marines and Army units advanced block by block, house by house. Every building was treated as hostile. Doors were breached with explosives. Rooms were cleared at gunpoint. The city became a labyrinth of dust, smoke, and sudden violence. Insurgents fought with suicidal determination. Snipers waited patiently. Booby traps turned everyday objects into weapons. Entire buildings collapsed under airstrikes and tank fire. Progress was measured in meters, sometimes in feet. The human cost of control. Urban combat in Fallujah pushed soldiers to physical and psychological limits. Fighters emerged from tunnels behind advancing units. Civilians, those who had not fled, were caught between fear and fire. Distinguishing enemy from non-combatant became nearly impossible. Night vision turned darkness into advantage, but it also revealed the true scale of destruction: shattered homes, burned streets, silent bodies. By the time organized resistance collapsed, over 2,000 insurgents killed, 95 U.S. service members killed, hundreds wounded on both sides. Fallujah was taken, but it would never be the same. Why Fallujah became a blueprint. The Second Battle of Fallujah became a case study in modern urban warfare. It demonstrated how disciplined infantry, supported by armor, drones and air power, could reclaim a fortified city at enormous cost. Militaries around the world studied Fallujah carefully, not because it was perfect, but because it showed what modern war in cities truly demands: patience, coordination, and a willingness to endure hell one block at a time. The battle where soldiers became cyborgs. Airports are meant for travel, not war. But in eastern Ukraine, the Donetsk International Airport became something else entirely, a symbol of resistance, endurance, and modern industrial warfare. What should have been a strategic objective turned into one of the longest and most brutal battles of the Ukraine conflict. For 242 days, this ruined airport refused to fall. A terminal turned into a fortress. When fighting erupted in eastern Ukraine in 2014, control of Donetsk Airport carried enormous symbolic and tactical value. Whoever held it could project power, claim legitimacy, and threaten supply routes. Ukrainian forces seized the airport early and began fortifying it, Concrete terminals, underground service tunnels, and control towers became defensive positions. Every corridor was mapped, every approach covered. Opposing them were separatist forces backed by Russian armor, artillery, and advisors. They believed the airport would fall quickly. They were wrong. Steel, concrete, and endless shelling. Day after day, artillery pounded the airport. Entire sections collapsed. The control tower, once a symbol of modern travel, was shattered into a skeletal ruin. Yet Ukrainian defenders remained. They rotated units through shattered terminals, holding positions under constant bombardment. Supplies arrived under fire. Evacuation of wounded became near impossible. The defenders earned a nickname from their enemies: cyborgs. Not because they were machines, but because no human should have survived what they endured. Close combat in ruins. As the airport collapsed, the battle became intimate and savage. Fighting moved into basements, stairwells, and rubble-filled halls. Grenades were tossed through broken walls. Snipers watched through cracks in concrete. Tanks fired point-blank into terminal buildings. There were no clear front lines, only destroyed spaces contested meter by meter. Finally, in January 2015, after months of resistance, the terminal collapsed entirely. The remaining Ukrainian defenders withdrew or were captured. The airport was no longer usable by anyone. But the message had already been sent. Why Donetsk Airport matters. The Battle of Donetsk Airport proved that modern warfare can grind into stalemate, even with tanks, drones, and artillery. It showed the power of morale, symbolism, and will. Militarily, the airport was eventually useless, destroyed beyond repair. Psychologically, it became legendary. It reminded the world that even in the age of precision weapons, wars can still become brutal tests of endurance, where victory is measured not in territory, but in time held and pain endured. Modern warfare is often described as clean, precise, and controlled. But these battles tell a different story. From the burning deserts of Iraq to the shattered terminals of Donetsk, from helicopters falling over Mogadishu to drones hunting armor from the sky, every era believes it has mastered war until reality proves otherwise. Technology changes, tactics evolve. But one thing remains constant: when humans fight, chaos always finds a way in. These 7 incredible modern battles did not just decide victories or defeats. They rewrote military doctrine. They shattered assumptions. And they warned the future. Because the next great battle may already be unfolding, and history will judge it the same way. Which modern battle shocked you the most, and why? Do drones and AI make wars shorter or more dangerous? Was urban warfare the real winner in modern conflicts? Which battle deserves its own full documentary next? A comment below. Your answer might decide the next video.